If you want more ease and flow in your life, you are going to love today's episode of Crystal Uncorked. I am talking to Adina Kroll about human design. And I mentioned this in the episode, but I really recommend for you to run your human design chart, put in your birth date, your birth time. That's what you need. And get what type you are through human design as you follow along with this episode. Not required, but it would help enhance your experience. You can learn a little bit more about you. We are talking about the 5 different types of human design and what some of the strengths and struggles are for each. And we also do a little mini reading on me, which I'm a generator, and majority of the population is. So there's a good chance you're a generator too. Now, this, when we kind of have these struggles that we can't really figure out, like something's not working, or this isn't working for me, but it works for somebody else, or I just feel like I'm going against the grain versus things being easier with more flow. There's a good chance that you're living out of alignment and you're not really living true to who you are and how you operate based on your makeup and your design, not what society tells us, but what your makeup is. And so that's why this episode is going to help you create more ease and flow. Adina, we've never met, but I feel like we have been friends for a long time. I loved having her on the show. Such a great conversation. The time went by so fast. You're going to learn a lot from her today. Real quick, Adina Kroll is an international business coach, sales expert, author, speaker, and defender for women who dare to desire more money, impact, and freedom. You can check her out at adinakroll.com. Follow her on Instagram at Adina Kroll. Let us know on Instagram what type you are on human design, because we are dying to know. I just find this all so fascinating. So buckle up. This is an awesome episode. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm Crystal Vilkaitis. I'm a curious, wine-loving entrepreneur who loves to learn and have open and honest conversations. Join me and my amazing guests as we talk about all sorts of relatable business and life stuff. It's my goal that you'll have fun, learn something new, and get inspired. Wine is not required, but is recommended. This is Crystal Uncorked. Adina, welcome to Crystal Uncorked. I'm thrilled that you are here.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we are going to have an awesome conversation today about human design. I am so curious. I cannot wait for us to dive in. But before we do, what are you drinking?
I am having a very sassy Merlot today.
Ooh, a sassy Merlot. I love it. I wish I was also having a sassy Merlot with you at this moment, but you are in the UK, so it is a little too early for me to be drinking some wine. So I am wearing a wine not shirt. Anybody that's seeing this, you see wine not, so I could at least have some wine with you. But I am drinking a kombucha. So I've got some tea this morning and it's delicious. So cheers to you and your sassy Merlot.
Cheers. I love a good kombucha.
I know, me too. Well, this is such a off topic thing, but caffeine, like coffee, has really been impacting me lately, which is a bummer because I love coffee, but it's just giving me so much anxiety. So my doctor has me like just not doing much caffeine. So I have to find alternatives, and kombucha is a really great alternative. So anyways, there's that. So Adina, we are going to be talking about human design today, and there is a good chance that a lot of people listening to this don't know too much about it. I guess I say that just because I don't know too much about it. I don't even know how you say it. Like, I ran my chart and got some information on it a few months ago and learned a little bit about myself, but I didn't totally know how to kind of like use it and dissect it. And so today you're going to tell us, this overview of what human design is, some of the strengths and struggles for each of the different types. And then we're going to do a little mini reading on my chart. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll learn a lot from that, everybody, even if you're not the same as me. So let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about what human design is.
So I love that you actually said that you pulled your chart first and foremost. Like the technical term would be that you get your body graph, but I actually prefer saying that you have a chart because it is a chart. It is a chart of something. So that's really cool. But what human design is, and I've heard someone say this, I don't remember who said this, but I completely agree. A few people say this. They say human design is basically astrology on steroids, where you combine a few of the modalities that you have, such as the I Ching, the Kabbalah, astrology together, and you use that to create like a piece of a whole. And the reason why I quite like it is because we all know that, well, I say we all know. We don't all know. I'm kind of like, I don't know why I said this right now. But a lot of the time we know that there are sort of like these 12 zodiac signs and like the horoscopes that you read in the newspaper, they're about as accurate as a dishcloth in dirty water, right? But then anyone who sort of looks into astrology a little bit more realizes that at the time that you were born, you know, it's not just the sun sign, the sign in the birth month that you're in that's responsible, but it's also the signs, where's the Mercury in, where's your Saturn in, which sign, right, in the houses. Human design takes this even further, where instead of 12 signs, we have the signs and 64 gates. And what this does is it creates a very unique blueprint of how you are designed energetically to move through this lifetime. And the beautiful thing is it doesn't predict the future. It doesn't tell you who you're going to love. It doesn't tell you what your personality is going to be like, right? It's none of the stuff that's like foreboding or foretelling. But what it really does do is the way that I like using it, it allows people to give themselves permission to be themselves and to be more of themselves. Because the first time when people hear about not only, like, it goes so much deeper, and we'll go into that, than type and strategy, and I'll go into what exactly these things are. But all of a sudden you have this person that can look at your chart and be like, okay, well, you're an overthinker and you are someone who probably struggles with feeling worthy at times. And here's what you can do, right? Now that all sounds incredibly general, but then when we look into the details of a chart, for instance, that can really give us something. Or how can we attract more ease and flow depending on where we are in our life? And that's sort of a very lengthy what is human design discussion.
No, I love it though. I mean, I was really fascinated to learn that it is kind of astrology on steroids, because I have just found this new deep interest in astrology over the past like year and a half. And I am constantly learning, and I feel like that is so hard to learn. Like there are so many pieces to astrology, because to your point, it's not just your birth date and like what your sign is. There's so much more with the planets and what's going on in today, where the planets are today. And so for human design, for us to use this tool to instead go against the grain and really understand ourselves and embrace that to create that flow, which I love that you use that word, because that is so something that I've been trying to find more of in my life. Like I'm becoming more aware of when things are harder and it's like, it shouldn't be this hard. Why is this so hard? What's the struggle? And trying to find something that is flowing and easier. So I'm very excited for us to learn more about how we can use our human design charts to create some flow. So are there four different, what would you call them? Like profiles that somebody can have?
So there are 5 different types in general. Okay. We call them types. And so what would be really, I'm going to preface this with something. So we've got, much like with astrology, we have something called the sun sign, your risings. Like everyone who's sort of into a little bit of astrology knows sort of like their top 3, like the big 3, rising sign, moon, and the sun sign, right? Like this is what we know. And think about that in human design. You also have like your big 3, like that's like the baseline of where you start. You've got your profile, you've got your type, and then you've got something called your incarnation cross, which we won't necessarily go into here. But what that basically means is your type is essentially the role you're here to play, right? in this particular lifetime. Then you have something called your profile. If you have your chart, you would have seen what the profile is. Now, the 5 types are a generator, a manifesting generator, a reflector, a projector, and a manifestor. So these are the 5 types that we have in human design, right? So that is the role you're going to essentially play, that you are here to play in this lifetime. And I'll go into that in a little minute. But then you have something called the profile, which is basically numbers. So you'll see either like a 5-2, a 3-6, a 6-3, or a to full profile, whatever, right? So it's got like loads of numbers in there. And basically what the profile is the character that you are here to play this role with. And then you've got something called the incarnation cross, which is quite advanced. That is basically like the story in which that character plays the role out. That's like the baseline story. The teacher that I learned a lot from, Karen Curry Parker, she calls it, that's like the mythology behind that character. And I believe there are like over 100 incarnation crosses. So there's like, there's a lot of nuance to these things. This is why I say that it's so beautiful to use it as a tool. And this is just like, if we compare it to astrology, that's like the big 3, right? So that doesn't even touch, like that's the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I had no idea it was so detailed. So for people that are new to human design, you basically plug in your birth date, your birth time, and it generates the profile for you and the types in your chart, which I'm assuming, can they do that on your website?
No, so they can't do that on my website because I don't have property of the software, but you can do that for free online. You can either Google human design chart, it's free. I generally use a website called Jovian Archive or mybodygraph.com.
Okay. Awesome. And we'll link to those too for people to have access, because I'm sure people are going to want to, I almost feel like you could pause this video, go do your chart, come back and keep watching so you can learn about each of these types. So are we going to kind of briefly go over the 5 different types then? Okay, cool. I love it. Now, what type are you?
I'm a projector.
Okay. Can't wait to know what that means. I don't know what that means yet.
In a second. So what I want you to sort of just understand, and for anyone who hasn't yet dipped their toes in human design, when you first see your chart being drawn up, it can be very confusing because you're like, there are all of these numbers and lines and these geometric shapes, and you're just like, what the hell is this? And what the fuck am I going to do with this? You don't necessarily need to worry about any of that just yet. What you want to find out in the very, very first instance is your type, your strategy, and your authority. Right? And we'll go into that in just a minute. Those are like the basic ones, because there's like, when we start getting into the gates and when we start getting into which gates are defined by which planets, like you can really go into just a little sneak peek. You can literally go into what are you here to talk about, right? Depending on which gates are in your Mercury placements. What are you driven by? What is it here that you are putting out into the world? How can you ground yourself to do that, right? Your earth placement. So there's really so much to go into, and depending on which circuits are then defined. So there's a lot to go by, right? It's very advanced stuff. We're not going to go into that today, but let's start with the type. So don't get confused by it. It's not as overwhelming when we start with type, strategy, and authority, and profile perhaps. That's sort of like enough. So I'm going to start with the generator type. We've got the generator, which is that you're one off, right? The generators are here for pure mastery, right? They're here to master like that one thing that they feel so lit up by, the thing that they choose to be doing for the rest of their life. And a lot of a lot of generators, they do really, really well with when they give themselves permission to pursue the thing that lights them up. And they can literally like spend hours and hours doing that one thing, right? And that's because you're essentially really here to be the elite, to be the master of that one thing that you choose to be, which is a really cool thing to do. And that is because as a generator, you have the ability, doesn't mean you always will, you have the ability to generate life force. right? Workforce through a defined sacral. If you are a generator, the little square, the second one from the bottom will be red, right? If you're a generator type, which means a pure generator or a manifesting generator, which I will go into in a minute, that makes you a generator. All the other types don't have that little red square. Okay, so generators are here to become masters. They are here to be responding to life. And that's when we sort of get into the strategy. Every type in human design has an emotional theme, right? The high expression of that emotional theme is what we call a signature in human design, and the low expression is what we call the not self theme. And for generator types, the low expression, when they know that they're out of alignment, is frustration. When a generator gets frustrated, one of two things is happening. Either they're out of alignment and they haven't been responding correctly, or they are currently in the period, because generators have a step stair learning curve. That means that when you find something that you're lit up by, you master it and you really dive deep into it. And then suddenly something stagnates, and that can also make you frustrated. And the problem for a lot of generators is that you burn out super, super fast, because the response that society has taught us as a whole, as a collective, to that frustration is for you to work more, right? So you're like, oh my God, yesterday I was able to work and like get this thing done in 2 hours, get this whole thing done in 2 hours. Today it's taking me 5 hours. I'm so fucking frustrated. Really fucking sucks. And then you start working more. That's your response to that, right? For the majority of generators anyway. But then what happens is this really vicious cycle where it happens again and again and again, right? And if you keep doing more and you keep doing more in response to that frustration, well, you know, your body will eventually be like, okay, screw this, I'm out.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Totally. That's the burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I so understand that. And I talk about this on the show. Like for me, I'll feel guilty. Like I feel like I really need to take the break or need to step away or need to stop that thing that's draining me. But then, and you know, there's certain cases where you just kind of got to do what you got to do. But I will, if I'm like, no, you got to take the break, then I feel so much guilt with it. And then I almost feel frustrated at myself for having guilt. It's awful.
So there are so many nuances to this. So we have a very big societal conditioning around who we are as a person. And the reason why I love human design is because it's meant to sort of lead you to a point where you are not pushing so much, right? Because the only type, and this, I'm going to start speaking about the other types in a minute, the only type, and I'm putting everything in quotes because you basically, I'm never wanting human design to be limiting. If you resonate with something from another type, you take that and you roll with it, right? If it feels easy, if you like it, you go. Because for all you know, your birth time may have been recorded differently and you might actually be that other type that you resonate more with, right?
Sure.
Right? So I don't ever want it to be limiting, but the whole point is really, it's just like, how can we move through life with much more ease? Because we're really not, like, life's not meant to be this fucking hard, right? Business is not meant to be this fucking hard. Money is just a fucking tool that should be used by us and not using us, right? And obviously in the age of capitalism, that's sort of the change I'm trying to sort of put out into the world. You know, how can we make money more easy? How can we put more money into the hands of women? And human design is a really easy tool to do that, because when someone first hears about their design for the very first time and he's like, oh my God, that's why I'm like that? I'm not broken, right? We can shift so much of that energy around that. It's really beautiful. Okay. Before I go on to the next types, just very quickly, I said that every type has an emotional theme, and what we call the not self theme, or the lower expression of that emotional theme for generators, is that of frustration. That's when we sort of know something's a little bit off and something needs to be in alignment. So what a generator's signature is, the higher expression of that emotion, is satisfaction. When a generator is satisfied with their work, well, there's obviously not going to be frustration. If you're satisfied with your work, right, it's the opposite of frustration. That's when you know things are going to be going great. And the way that generators can do this is where we come with the strategy. is to wait and respond. If you've seen your body graph, you will have seen that strategy said wait and respond. And you might have been like, the hell? What do you mean wait and respond? It's because generator types respond to life all the time. And the thing that generator types struggle with the most, but actually have a really cool time when they get it, is patience, right? Because what is essentially happening for a generator type, you have the sacral energy, you have this motor defined that allows you to sort of create that workforce. And what a generator technically needs to do is to visualize, like, hey, what is it that you want to do? Okay, well, I want to get 5 new clients, or I want to find a dentist that doesn't make me shit my pants, or I want to, I don't know, find a life partner, get an idea to my greatest best-selling book in the future, like whatever, right? So you start visualizing something as a generator, and that's when you get patience instead of acting on it, right? Which is what the world has taught us to do. You wait to respond. And when you cultivate that patience, very quickly, it's almost unfair how quickly it gets for you generator types, right? But very quickly, something in the outside world will present itself in form of an ad, in form of a sign, in form of a person, in form of a post-it note, like whatever. Like something in the external world will present itself to you and give you something to respond to as it relates to this. And you probably already have examples of when something like this has happened, right?
Yep, totally.
Do you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so honestly, like I have a solo episode that I'm going to be recording this week about manifesting, which I feel like is kind of similar to what you're saying. Like, and I have these examples where I visualize something and it's like, I almost don't even try to visualize it. It's like a vision comes in and I see it and I'm like, whoa, I so feel that. I love that. And then there are several times where fast forward, it might be a few months, it might be up to a year. And all of a sudden I realize, oh, I'm in that moment. Like this is happening for me. And so I really think I believe it. I've experienced it for myself. You're right. Sometimes it does happen so fast, like that random email that will come in out of nowhere once you've committed to something of where you want to go with your business. And then somebody's like, hey, we're looking for a partner. We're looking for a service provider. And it's like, whoa, I was just thinking that. So, but I think the problem I find myself, at least with this problem, is like taking the time to do that because we are pushing through. You use that word push, like that's such a key word, pushing through and doing the to-do list and doing. And it's so hard. Sometimes we just are like almost not aware. We don't make it a priority to stop, think, feel, visualize. And then the other keyword is patience. And that one can be a challenge for sure, I feel like. But it's worth it. You know, it really always does work out, but you just have to get that clarity and take that time.
Right. But the thing is, because, and this is sort of where I personally tie in my own mission with these kinds of things, is because if we think about this whole thing as a collective, right? I mean, as a woman in business yourself, you will have probably heard so many people talking about how you should be selling, what you should be doing, how you should be acting, right? Like whether it's someone telling you, oh, well, you have to show up professionally, or you can't swear, it's not something that you should be doing, or when we go into sort of like the gender stereotypes of, oh my God, you're so bossy, right? But then also it's just like, yeah, but you also have to go out and do it. And then when we couple that with the fact that what women have been traditionally praised for, being humble, self-sacrificing, putting others first, asking for money and making a living and being financially independent, they just clash. Because are you, like, in our right mind, has society taught us that if we're asking for money, are we humble? Right? So how do we then crush that stereotype? And that's sort of, again, why I love human design, is because it's basically the science of how to be yourself, whereas society, whether consciously or not, again, we could talk about the patriarchy for that matter or not, but let's not open that can of worms or that wine glass.
It's too early for me. I'm going to need wine for that. So
let's put the world to rights. Right? But what human design teaches us is there is no one size fits all, right? There is no, even though the types might operate on a similar way, you as one generator will operate very differently to a different generator that has even got a slightly similar design, but has different connections in that particular design, right? And so what that really tells us is it's really about trusting yourself. And we've not been taught how to trust ourselves because at every point in our life, we've been taught, look, there's someone who's wiser than you are about yourself, right? Whether it's, very current, women's bodies and what we can do with them, right? Or whether it's, right, like from a very young age, whether it's parents, teachers, bosses, it's just like, always an authority figure. But then at what point do we take authority over our own selves? Because that person doesn't know me better than I do. That person doesn't know how I want to run a business. That person doesn't know what family member I want to be, how I want to interact with people, right? And that's why I love human design, because it basically teaches you can you start trusting yourself and your design to a point that you don't necessarily, like, you can allow others to be who they are, but then you can also shine more in who you are. And that's the beauty of what I believe is in human design, which makes everything so much easier. So trust is a big word here. Trust in yourself.
It is, which I think then helps you live more of an authentic life to you versus, like you were saying, of what society expects out of us. And that is where we can get that flow. I love it. This is awesome.
Cool. I'm enjoying, I can talk about human design all day long. So please stop me.
Oh, I bet you could. I feel like there's so much. So that is a little bite-sized nugget of a generator. So then what would be the next one?
So the next one, I'm going to start with the manifestor next. And then I'm going to go to the manifesting generator, the projector, and the reflector. The manifestor makes up around 7% of the entire world population. They're one of the rarest types. The manifestors have no defined motor. And what manifestors are here to do, they are literally here to initiate new ways. As a matter of fact, a really good example, the person that brought human design as a system into being was, in fact, a manifestor. And the way that manifestors work is they literally are here to bring new ideas into life, not only initiate their own ideas, right, but also initiate people into something new. So what manifestors are then here to do is when they're creating new paths, right, they work quite fast. Manifestors are very, very fast because a lot of the time the world isn't quite ready yet for the ideas. It doesn't always quite make sense, right? You can imagine that when Ra first came out with the idea and with the concept of human design, something like this has never existed. What do you mean you want to combine the I Ching, the Kabbalah, and astrology and all of these things together? I'm just like, it makes no sense. Here you have lines and gates. What are you talking about, right? But he did it. And what manifestors are essentially then here to do is they bring these into existence, these new ideas into existence, but they're not always meant to finish it, right? Which is really, really cool. That's when sort of our generator types sort of come in and continue the work if they feel lit up by what it is that the manifestor has started creating, for instance, right? Which is really, really cool. So bringing new ideas into life. What can often happen with a manifestor is that they are not living in, so the manifestors are technically the only ones who can really just go out and do it. They don't have to wait for a response. They don't have to wait for invitations, etc., etc. The manifestors are the only ones who can go out and really do it. The problem is that because they are so rare, they've often been taught by society that they have to ask for permission. Again, we have the authority figures, right? And that makes them very angry, which is the manifestor's low emotional theme. They're not self theme. And that's sort of stopping a lot of manifestors from actually taking charge. They're not here to ask for permission. They are here to, when they get an idea, when they're just like, when they feel like, oh my God, they feel that spark, they have a very direct connection to that source. They feel the spark and they're like, oh my God, I really feel drawn to start creating this thing. They're really good at it and they're very, very fast. All they technically have to do is just inform the people that could potentially be impacted by it, such as if you have a manifestor in your life and they own a business, they just post out a post, a tweet, or an Instagram, and they're just like, guys, I'm going to be offering this one thing. Here's what it's going to look like. They're not asking for permission, but this is just to sort of stabilize, right? Because they've got a very like, we call this a repelling aura. I don't necessarily, I'm trying to find a new word for it. But they basically, because they're so fast and they have to initiate, they kind of have to make way, right, in their field. And that's sort of where that comes from. So a manifestor then can get very angry. That's when a manifestor knows when they're out of alignment, right? Also, a manifestor doesn't like being told what to do because they're here to initiate.
Yeah.
They don't like being told what to do because they just know things. They're incredibly wise. So the high emotional expression of a manifestor, which is really, really cool, is called peaceful, right? When they're at peace, when they feel peaceful, that is when they know that they're in alignment. And so the strategy is to inform and initiate. So if there's anyone listening right now who sometimes, feels what it is that I just said, where it was like, oh my God, people have been telling me this, you can feel very slowed down by the world, right? Because you're so fast. You are only informing the rest of us because we need time to catch up to you because we don't have the ability to initiate, right? Doesn't mean that we can't initiate some things, but when it's impacting other people for a manifestor, that's when they need to inform. But when you feel peaceful, right, which is what I invite all of you, depending on your type, try to embody the higher signature of like the high emotional theme, right? You as a generator, when you can embody that satisfaction, things will feel automatically a little bit easier without you having to know your full human design, for instance, right? When a manifestor starts embodying this peacefulness, how can you create more peace in your life, right? Especially also lots of rest for you as a manifestor. You work in big spurts. That'll help immensely. So that's it for the manifestor. Go on to the manifesting generator now, right? And again, you may know a few people already who fall into these categories. And when you know human design, suddenly you see people a little bit differently. It's just like, oh my God, they're a manifestor. Of course, I shouldn't tell them what to do, right? They want something, they ask for it.
Yeah. Do people like business owners, because I will have my team take the StrengthsFinder test and the Colby test just so I can understand kind of how they work. I feel like this would be cool to have my team take too, to kind of understand them a little bit better too. Yeah. When
we go through all the types, you'll probably see how this can benefit you. Because I'll tie it in a neat little bow so that it makes a little bit more sense. But is like, am I talking sense so far? Or is this very convoluted?
Oh, this is awesome. Loving it. Yes.
So, fantastic.
Yeah.
So now we have the manifesting generators, which are a unique hybrid of the pure generators and the manifestors. And manifesting generators, I'm going to shorten it to MG for short, so I don't always have to say the whole word, which you'll see a lot of the time as well. MGs and pure generators make up the majority of the entire world population, right? So about 70%, 72% of the entire world population are generators and manifesting generators, which is sort of fairly even split between the pure and the MGs.
Okay.
Right? So the manifesting generators are basically this unique hybrid where the overarching theme for the manifesting generator is still to wait and respond, right? The generator part of them still waits and responds. They also have that theme of frustration, but a manifesting generator is also using some of that manifestor part. So they also have an emotional theme, the low emotional theme of anger, and they're looking also for peace, right? So they're doing a little bit of both. And manifesting generators are here to find shortcuts, right? Where pure generators are here to master something and stick to one thing. And you'll likely have someone out there, right? And you yourself, you're just like, yeah, I just want to do this one thing and then I'll be cool with it, right? Manifestors want to do lots of different things and not finish them. And the world unfairly tells manifestors to just go and stick with one thing and finish something, which also really pisses them off. And the manifesting generators, they will stick to one thing every once in a while, but they're like manifestors. They're not here to just do one thing and master it. They're literally here to do multiple projects at once. And they're very unfairly labeled as being fickle, which they're not. And anyone, like, especially like manifesting generators have a very special place in my heart, because for them, it has been so hard. When they were children, they wanted to do one thing. A manifesting generator is literally here to have multiple projects at the same time. But the world's just like, can you just stick to one thing? Can you just finish that one task? Can you just do this one thing for God's sake, right? But it is healthy for a manifesting generator and necessary to be doing multiple things at once and skip steps. Very, very important, because they're here to show us that life isn't so linear and so static. Right? They're here to show the rest of us, to show that life can be fun and you can chop and change and you get to change your mind. So they're the kind of people who will be like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. Oh, I'm also going to save the animals. Oh, I'm going to start my own hairdresser salon. Does anyone want to have their nails done? Yes. They want to do it at the same time. And that is healthy for them. And if they don't allow themselves to go with these urges, they can become quite ill. Right. So they, depending on what lines are activated, they can get stomach problems. Again, they can get burnout, because remember, the generator part of them just wants to keep doing more and responds to that frustration. Right. And the manifestor part is really angry, really, really angry.
Yeah. So this is blowing my mind a little bit, because I mean, I'm glad that you said if you recognize yourself as a different type, like you can go with that, because I do really identify with the generator, but Adina, like I have to have variety in my life. Like ever since I was a child, I grew up an only child. I have two half brothers I met later, but so I was always by myself, and I was always making all these random businesses. I had to rearrange my room like every 2 weeks. I really needed change. And then I've had my current business, Crystal Media, for 9 years. And, you know, we joke like I'll create new things, which is like me almost creating new problems sometimes too, because I'm like, I get bored, and you find entrepreneurs like do get bored. And I really was like sticking to the focus of Crystal Media, but something was missing. And so starting this podcast and having something else, I all of a sudden got more energy for both, you know, like through doing something else. And I have another idea of creating a wine bar, like a physical storefront, and maybe franchising that. And then I've got ideas about a real estate company that I want to do. And when I think about all those things, I get really energized. But then there is this thing that comes back that is like, no, but you need to focus on one thing. If you're not focused, then you're going to do a little not well, you know, and you're going to really be spread too thin. But I just feel like for me, like the more I have, the better I'm performing. So I wonder if I am a little bit of a manifesting generator then.
So you might have some gates that would do this, but I just had a quick peek at your chart. And I'm really not surprised that you said this, because, and again, this is a little bit more advanced, as we call this variables. There are arrows to the left and to the right of your human design chart. And for you, these all point to the right. So very fancy term, we call them quadrites. But what this essentially means is that you are very open, right? It's more of like a feminine way of doing things. It means you're sort of flowing and doing things. And one of these variables, for instance, is in your environment. And what when we have a right-facing variable in the environment side, what this basically means is that you need a lot of change, which means that if you want to, you'll probably find yourself being a lot more focused if one day you work at a coffee shop, the other day you work from your sofa. Throughout the day, you change positions of where you work. If you have a desk, it'll probably make you procrastinate a lot.
Interesting.
right? But you
Yeah.
have an open head, an open crown. We'll go into that in a minute, which means you're very open to a lot of inspiration, but you're not always designed to act on every bit of inspiration, right?
Okay.
So this is when our strategy and authority comes in, for instance. So that is when you start deciding, okay, well, what is correct for me? Because as someone who also has an open crown center, which is the very first triangle on the top of your body graph chart, you are someone who's basically here to receive lots and lots of information, lots and lots of ideas, lots and lots of inspiration, right? You find that when you're by yourself, you have inspiration, you are inspired, but you can't quite make heads or tails of it, right? You almost need to watch a podcast, listen to a podcast or read a book, whether or not it's related to that idea or not. But then all of a sudden you read a phrase, you get some form of external clue, and suddenly whatever it is that you want, it clicks. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. And I so feel that too. Like I have to listen to a show every day. It just fills me up. I love walking and listening to somebody. It does generate more ideas and hash out things. And it's kind of like an outlet for me. And then I do, like I say this a lot in my company, but two heads are better than one. Just having the brainstorming and having that group effort, I find I thrive a lot more. Or if we're doing like events, whether it's virtual or in person, I really love that. So that makes sense. Now I know we're getting a little off guard of these off track here of the different types, but it's fascinating.
It is, isn't it? And the thing is, this is why just like astrology, it's just like, if I just talk about the type, you can see, because we are all everything, right? We are all each type, because the sun transits through the entire gates, and at one point or another, it'll connect us and make us feel a bit more like a projector. Will make us feel a bit more like a manifestor. Will make us feel, right? Just like when we look at astrology, sun's in Virgo at the moment. So we feel a bit more like list building, for instance, right? If we want to go very stereotypical about these things, right? And so it just moves through. That's the beauty of it. So that's why I'm saying like the type is a good starting point. But if you want to go real deep, look at your design. But it's really cool that you said that. So that's what we have for the manifesting generators, right? So again, the high emotional theme is, again, a mixture of what the manifestor and the generator are. It's like when you are looking at feeling satisfied and at peace, that's when you know when you can feel a little bit more in alignment. And it can really be the little things in your day-to-day where you can start cultivating that, right? And again, it's about patience. It's about trusting, right? As generators and manifesting generators, you will always, every day, every second of your life, you are responding to something. It's just whether or not you pay attention to it or not. And when you start paying attention to it, and when you start trusting that you will get sent something to respond to, that's when something real cool shit happens, right? That's when you start getting opportunities, emails out of the blue, when you find a message that says yes, and you're like, oh my God, I was just thinking whether I should do that, right? And it's just like, that's when it gets really cool. And there's something quite magical about this, if you think about it, where it's just like, if I want something and if I want confirmation as a generator and manifesting generator, you are the only types who can use yes or no questions to find clarity, internal clarity. Work very well because of that sacral, right? You literally have that gut feeling. So it's very much a gut feeling. When something is correct for you, you will have quite a visceral response. You'll have two responses. One's in your head. That's the one we don't want, right? Because life's not here to be logical. But then you also have a gut response that if you think about like when you did the podcast, it's probably quite a visceral feeling of almost, a lot of generators describe it as being pulled towards it. Or pulled back of it, right? When you pull back, it's like, don't do it. And it can be an internal like almost like this voice, or an internal That's what a lot of generators describe. I'm not a generator, so I don't know how accurate this is, but a lot of generators resonate when I say the or na and the visceral. So I'm relying on you guys to tell me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I've said that actually many times. I couldn't explain it, but I'm just pulled to do this, and I don't know why, and I don't know exactly where it's going yet, but I just am pulled to do it. And so I'm showing up and doing it and being patient and learning along the way. So I totally agree with that.
Amazing. And the beautiful thing is, right, for you generator types, for you MGs and for you generators, the more excited and lit up by what you are doing and pulled towards you are, the more energy you have to start and continue the project, right? So when you feel, for instance, on a day-to-day basis that you're slowly falling out of love with what it is that you're doing, can you find a way? Well, first of all, rest, because generators and manifestor, please rest. Like, I know you have the energy, but please rest. It needs recharging.
Yeah.
But also, how can you, like, what would make it feel exciting again, right? It's very often that you generator types, you will start putting a lot of pressure on yourself and putting a lot of letting other people step over your boundaries. One of the questions for a defined sacral, which only you have, is very much like, are you letting people step over your boundaries, right? You've read my 9 center series. You said, and you're just like, if you have a defined sacral, that is one of the questions for the defined sacrals, is because you have the energy. You're just like, yeah, sure, I can do that. But then 3 days later, you're like, what the fuck have I done?
I know. Yes. What have I done? Exactly. I so know that. It's like, yeah. And then fuck. I was so in the yes mode that day, but I didn't really think this through. Yeah.
Right. So that's really cool. So that's when you sort of, like, the more lit up by what you are, the more energy you have, which is really cool to understand when you want to do pretty much anything. Right. So then we have the last 2 types. We have the projector. The projector is part of the types of what I'm of. That makes around sort of 20 to 22% of the entire population. So it's not too rare, but it's rarer than a generator type, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just because projectors are the newest type out of all of them. And projectors are here to guide, right? We have the majority of the people on the planet who are generator types, MGs and pure generators, and the world has taught them that you just have to go out and do it, right? Which means that we have a lot of burnt out generators and manifesting generators out there who are taught that they just have to go out and do it and make it happen. But we know that only manifestors can do that. But manifestors have been taught to be generators, and generators have been taught to be manifestors, right? So that's where it all goes out of whack. And that's where projectors come in. Projectors are here to be very wise about other people and about the energy of other people. And so they're the natural guides. They're here to sort of guide the people into their path of least resistance, and they make very good managers. Doesn't mean that other types can't make good managers. Again, human design is not limiting. It's just based on the design, again, as a whole. So take that with a grain of salt. But projectors are then here to guide. And so what happens with a lot of projectors is, because they're the newest type, their strategy is to wait for an invitation. Now, projectors are probably the most frustrated out of all of them when they hear their design for the first time, because I remember feeling like that myself, when it's just like, what the fuck? I have to wait for an invitation. Can I not just be a generator and respond to things?
Right.
Right? Like, what do you mean I have to wait for an invitation? And then I remember sitting there and being like, okay, fine, I'm just not going to do anything, because a lot of the information that you find on the internet says like, yeah, projectors, you're only here to work like 2 to 3 hours a day because you don't have a defined sacral, right? And a lot of projectors, myself included, felt very validated with this, because we're perpetually tired, right? Again, the rest of the world is also perpetually tired, but a bit different, because we don't have any motors defined in our human design chart. But what happens is, because we're not designed as projectors to have the traditional 9 to 5. We don't work well at all in that. We don't have the energy. Because we're here to guide people, we're very much types who need to research a lot, and obviously not just sleep and rest and sit on the couch all day, but 2 to 3 hours, 2 to 4 hours of active work, and then the rest of the time rest, play, and hone your zone of genius, right? Like, learn more about your craft. And so what waiting for the invitation looks like for a projector, and again, if you resonate with this, if any of you listeners resonate with this, what waiting for the invitation looks like is really having people come to you, but only in relation to other people. Doesn't mean you can't sell yourself, doesn't mean you can't make offers to people, right? But projectors will feel very frustrated if you probably have a projector friend. They go into a room full of people and they can already tell you, who needs to do what. And it's just like, okay, you probably need to go and rest. You probably should go and do this. And they very often dish out their advice. And I know this because I was that person, right? We dish out our advice to people. And the thing is, people get very angry with us because this is why we need to wait for the invitation. If we dish out advice without it being asked for, it's not pretty. People don't want to hear it, right? This is why we need to wait for that recognition. We need people to recognize us in order for them to accept the guidance we have to give them. And that's where that wait for the invitation comes from. And the beautiful thing is there are a few cheats that you can use for this as a projector. I'm not going to necessarily go into them because I want to look at your chart. I'm very excited about looking at your chart. But what that basically means is that the low emotional theme of a projector is bitterness. Like a bitter projector is not pretty. Trust me, I've been there. Again, our low emotional themes, they follow us through our entire life. Like get comfy with feeling frustrated, right? There's not a bad thing. Like lower emotional themes, we need to stop labeling them as bad. Obviously, they don't feel nice, but the more we resist them, the longer they'll take. They'll stay. Right. But a bitter projector is someone who's not going to get recognized, is not going to get that promotion, is not going to get those clients. And I know this because I did so many business courses where I did exactly what like my generator and manifesting generator coaches have told me. And the people were just like, here's my 3-step formula and you just need to do this and it's great. And as a projector, you're such a good student. You're like, why the fuck? Like, I'm doing all of these and it's not working. Why is it not working? Right? Yeah. Like you said, your 3-step formula is proven. It's just like, clearly not. Why? Why? And once I found out that I was a projector, it's because we're not meant to initiate ourselves into other people's lives, right? So business works a little bit different for us as projectors.
So then would it be more like invitational where kind of like from a content marketing perspective of just really like building a relationship first almost so people really trust you to then ask for advice? Or, I mean, what would you do then in that sense?
So for the projector in general, it's really about showing up and just being visible as fuck, right? Because in order to get recognized by your correct people as a projector, they need to see you first, right? So you can market yourself. You can talk about your offers. As long as your guidance doesn't directly affect another person, go ahead, initiate, talk about your offers. Tell people what you have available, right? But as soon as it goes into another person, and this is what a lot of marketing courses teach you outside, it's like, yeah, you just, when someone comments, you go and slide into their DMs. That doesn't work for us. As a matter of fact, my experience, not only do you get people really, really pissed off when you do that, no matter how friendly and no matter how much they loved what it is that you said, but it's likely that they will start selling to you. And it's really annoying because when a projector's guidance hasn't been invited, people don't hear us. It's very likely, it's very common for a projector's idea to get stolen. It's really weird.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. It's so cool. I so get now, like, understanding yourself because you're following the system of somebody else's training and then it's not working for you. And that can be really frustrating and you just want it to work, right? We want the flow. We want the ease. And so something like that is not going to work for a projector. Like it's insane. I love it.
Yeah. And once a projector, again, this is what I love about this whole human design concept is it almost gives you permission because I remember feeling so shitty for I'm at a party. Why am I not only am I I sort of move around. I have these two modes. You probably resonate with this as well because I'm not fully introvert or extrovert. I choose, right? So sometimes I'm more extroverted and sometimes I'm more introverted, but I can be in a crowd of people and I can talk and people would just talk over me or they would literally not see me. And I'm like, what the fuck? I am shouting almost, right? It's just why is that? It's just well, when you start realizing who you are as a type, it suddenly makes sense. And that's when you can start harnessing the power to be invited into conversations, right? So, and it gets to be super fucking effortless. Now I can be in a group and I know exactly how I need to feel about myself in order to not get ignored, right? In order to feel this. And this is where we get into the signature, the high emotional theme of a projector. Our high emotional theme is success. When we feel successful, we're not bitter, right?
Yep.
So that's a projector. So that's really cool. So there's so much there. And then lastly, we have the reflector. And what the reflectors are super special. They're like 1% of the entire world population, right?
Wow.
Reflectors are super rare. And they're the only lunar beings out of the entire 5 types. All of us other types, projectors, manifestors, and generator types, we're all solar beings, which is why we basically either get to initiate or we only have to wait like a day or a couple of hours, right? Because the sun moves around very fast. But the reflectors, their strategy is basically to wait up to a full lunar cycle, which means up to 28 days to come to clarity. What that means is that a reflector is very, very special because all of their centers are white, right? All of the geometric shapes are white, and they are here to basically amplify and reflect the health of the community. And this is really, really important because not only are they super wise, anywhere where we have white centers, we have the potential to be very, very wise, but that's also where we have our deepest conditioning, right? Because everywhere where there's white is where we amplify and we take in energy in and we amplify and reflect. And a reflector is that because all their centers are white. And what is really good is because they reflect the health of the community. A reflector needs a lot of alone time. A reflector needs to really be in a situation where they are around people that makes them feel good, right? Because their low emotional theme is disappointment. They get very disappointed if they're in unhealthy environments because they just have to be, if they're in a coffee shop and everyone else around them is depressed, they will amplify and magnify that shit.
Okay.
Take very good care of our reflectors. But if they're in a community, which is why it's really cool to see them in a workplace or have them as staff, when your reflector is happy and healthy, you know this is a good thing because they then amplify everything that we are. They amplify your workforce. They amplify the guidance of a projector. They amplify the wisdom and the initiation of a manifestor. So that's how it all brings it really cool together. And their high emotional theme is surprise. So when a reflector can feel surprised on a regular basis, that's when you know that they're in alignment, when they can make decisions that feel easy, when they can call in money, opportunities, people, whatever they want.
Wow. I feel like we need more reflectors than 1%. Like they seem so, especially when we have good in our communities and workforce. Maybe not if we have darkness, but like still, that's so crazy. The only 1%, are these people, you said like they kind of need that alone time. Are they also, I feel like they might be kind of sensitive or just like very pick up on energies of other people, and that can really impact them. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. So our reflectors, we really need to look after them because they really reflect the health of the community that they're in, but also because they're so empathetic, they're so open. I mean, we do say that they have like a Teflon coating. So obviously they're not wallflowers. They're not some fragile little thing. They're very, very strong. But if a reflector isn't aware of their type and they get sucked into whatever it is that they're in, it can make them feel like something's wrong with them. Again, any type who isn't aware of their type often feels like something's wrong with them. It's not. You're not broken, right? Exactly why I love human design. It's like it's the science of who you are as a person. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How cool. Okay. So we have our 5 types. And anybody listening to this, I would love if you go over to Instagram or on the blog and share it, ideally on Instagram, because you can tag Adina Kroll, which we'll attach to, and share what your type is, because I'm so curious what everybody is in this community. And then, so we don't need to spend too much time on my chart here, but there's probably like, do you do these chart readings, Adina? Like, yeah, there's probably one-to-one consultations that people could reach out if they want to go deep on their chart, because there's a lot that you can share about a person here. But should we move into that next? Okay. It's exciting.
Sure. So I'm just going to pull up your chart right now. So you have got, so we've already talked about your variables, right? So you are something what we call a quad right, where all your arrows are pointing to the right, which means that you are very likely feeling a lot better when you are snacking on food, right? Rather than having big, heavy meals on a regular basis. You probably feel a lot better if you have lots and lots and lots of smaller snacker meals throughout the day. But that also comes with the things that you are doing, right? So you're also almost snacking on that energy, snacking on the energy of people, snacking on your work, right? So lots of small bursts, lots of very flexible bursts, not so much, oh my God, I have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a metaphor, but also very much as a very specific thing, right? It's very much like, oh, I'll have a coffee right now, and then an hour later I'll have a half muffin, and then a half hour later I might have some nuts, right? So it probably feels a lot better for you when you get to snack not only on food, but also on, that's how you take in energy.
Okay. Well, and it makes me think of too that, like you said, my environment, because I do have a desk and I have an office, but I will take my laptop and be on the sofa, go to the other sofa, go outside, in my bedroom. Like, I need to mix things up and have a different scene all throughout the day. I'm in like different parts of the room and outside, and I didn't really pay attention to that, but that's almost like a snacking throughout my day for where I work too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the snacking. And you also have the variable that is very fluid, very open with your environment. You do very well when you get to chop and change throughout the day. It's healthy for you. It'll likely make you feel more productive when you get to do that. Your perception is very right, which means that you are someone who perceives things very openly, who's very open. So when we talk about perception, sometimes it's also called the manifestation arrows, the bottom right one. When it points to the right, you're a bit more open when it comes to the visuals, how you perceive the world. So let's say, for instance, you're trying to call in a new leather jacket. So you could just be like, hey, I want to have a new leather jacket. Whereas someone with a left facing arrow might be more like, I want to have a black leather jacket, right? With a zip that is on the side, a bit more specific. Yours is a bit more non-specific. And then you also, the way you take in information is very open. So you probably would have struggled a little bit with the traditional school system. You probably find yourself forgetting things a little bit. I'm the same. I've got a right arrow in my awareness as well. So traditional school system doesn't work very well. You do very well when you learn the way you want to learn. So if you don't make yourself learn something, right? If you are just like, oh my God, I want to learn this one thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, right, that's enough. But if you make yourself learn more and memorize more, you'll probably forget more than you took in. Whereas if you're like, I found this when I learned human design, and I'm like, I'm going to have to learn all the 64 gates, and I sat down and I couldn't do it, and I stared at it. And then every once in a while I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn about this gate, and then I'm going to learn about the heart. And I just did it and chopped and changed, and all of a sudden things made a lot more sense.
That is fascinating, because I am so that way. Like, if I'm interested and I'm coming at that like curious place of needing more, I can learn, I can research, I consume that content and do remember it. But yeah, I mean, school, I feel like, what did I learn? I don't remember a lot of things. Right. And I have I do kind of feel like I have a bad memory. Like, I have to write down a lot too. So
that's how you design. That's the beautiful thing, right? Doesn't it feel cool? And that's sort of part of your open head, part of the variables. Again, so many factors play into place. But someone with an open crown, which is the top triangle of your head, again, that's where sort of ideas and inspiration and things come in, right? But also with the variable, you're not designed to retain every piece of information. You're designed to retain the information that is correct for you, which is when you start using your strategy, right? That's when you start. It's just like, okay, well, there's this inspiration. Should I act on it or not, right? Very rudimentary example for a generator. You're just like, well, I have this idea of starting a wine bar. You could totally play with that. then you're just like, okay, well, universe, you go and send me something to respond to. I trust because I know that there's something will come, right? And then you trust. And then you might find a person who's talking about a wine bar and they're just like, yeah, I did this thing and it was really cool. And suddenly you get very lit up by this. That's when you respond to your sacral, right? Whereas if, let's say, the person might be talking about it and you're like, that's when you know it's not the correct thing for you to, that's when you get to play, right? That's when you be like, okay, well, send me something that would be correct for me, for instance. You literally get to ask and be like, ask and respond. That's what you get to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Right? And I have to say, I mean, I have a perfect example of this. Last October, we were in Colorado. We are moving to Colorado in a couple of weeks. I'm in California right now. And we were looking at a property and we mentioned to the realtor that I'm looking for maybe doing a wine bar. And he mentioned to this other realtor and he's like, oh, well, if you got time, I want to show you something. And we go over to this cool little community. It's all these shipping containers and they have an open container for rent to lease, that used to be a bar. And so it's completely like set up. It's super cute, completely set up for wine bar. I didn't say yes to it because this was last October when we've been living here in California. But then I peeked, a couple weeks ago and it's still available. And I get that feeling of excitement, like you're saying, of the pull and excitement in my sacral. I also get like mad butterflies and I get kind of nervous and like fearful because it's such a different change. But it really is like more of that pull versus retracting and not doing it. So it's pretty neat. I need to, I want to use that more of asking and saying like, give me something to respond to.
Yeah. And you can start with small things, right? It's very hard for a lot of women that are coached in the beginning. I use this a lot in business and it's like, okay, well, when it comes to your pricing, when it comes to your offers, when it comes to selling to people, right, it can be quite daunting because we're so entangled with our businesses and our identity that it can get really hard. And I'm like, well, start small. Should I take a bath right now? When respond, you'll probably get something to respond to within minutes. So long as the more you surrender and trust that you will get something to respond to, the faster that will come. The more you hold on to is it going to come? When's it going to come? What's it going to look like? Right. That's why the universe is just like, well, you don't trust that you get something to come. Right.
Yeah. So you're not ready. You're not ready. You're trying to control it too much. Yeah.
Right. You don't have control of how things happen. You just get to respond to whether or not you like the thing that's happening right now.
Right.
Right. So that's sort of like the open head. So you have, when I look at your chart, that once you have an idea and once you have inspiration and once you have something that you're just like, an idea that you want to act on, it's actually fairly easy for you based on your design to make up an opinion. You have very strong opinions about something. And then you also, based on your design, you don't actually struggle voicing your opinion to other people because it's directly connected to your throat. So that's a really cool thing to have. But what's really interesting for you is because you have an open crown, keep doing what you're doing by listening and reading and doing something. Doesn't have to be related to the thing, but anyone with an open crown, such as myself, I go to coffee shops and sometimes write content because just being around people, someone is bound to have definition in their crown or give me access to their inspiration, right? So you can harness other people that way. It's really cool. And then suddenly it makes it much eeasier. Anyone suffers from writing book, right?
That's amazing. I'm just going to go and sit next to people and be like, am I getting something from you? But I get, I really do. It completely makes sense to me and productivity wise. And actually, this would make a lot of sense on multiple levels. I love working on an airplane. So, and I think that's the change of environment. And there are so many people around that I might then have access to some of that. Plus, it's closed down distractions, right? My dogs aren't there, unfortunately, and I can't take phone calls or things like that. I'm just really in the zone, and it is some of my best work. It's really crazy. So that might be part of that too. It's so cool.
Yeah, there's so much. So what the open crown sometimes does is it's one of the two pressure centers. So when again, anywhere where you are white in your chart, you are open to a lot of conditioning from the outside. And so people, again, I have this myself. I have a completely open head and ajna myself. You can give yourself a lot of pressure to figure things out. It's just like, right? So there's a lot of pressure to think for people with open heads. It's just like, how am I going to make this work? How is this idea going to come to life? How am I going to say this thing? It's just like, you're not designed to do that. You're designed to be open for that to come to you. If you have definition in that head, you are designed to figure out how to do that, but you will struggle with too many thoughts. So that's when you sort of have to feel pressure to organize your thoughts, right? But when you're open there, you feel pressure to have to figure it out. It's just like, well, when you can give yourself permission to know, it's just like, well, I have this inspiration, doesn't quite make sense, but I know that the answer will come. And you just walk around, you go shopping, you speak to someone. I have a generator friend with definition in her entire head, and I plug myself into her. When I need to make sense of an inspiration that I have, it's just like, hey, there's this idea that I have, YouTube channel, for instance, right? It's just like in a wig, and she's just like, oh my God, so here's this thing that I have. And then all of a sudden this idea that I have comes into place. And that's when you can speak it into existence.
Love it. I love I think so much. All the details. How's it going to work? What's the timeline? What's the cost? Where are we go? Who's involved? What do I need? Is this right? It's like, I think about my thinking. It's amplified. So I need to just stop when I catch myself doing that, and instead say, I'm ready for those answers to come to me. And when they do, I will respond.
Yes. And depending, again, you are open to so much inspiration, right? If you are around, and you will know this, for instance, let's say you are going out in a restaurant and someone feels, I don't know if you have an open emotion. Yes, you also have an open emotional center. Okay, so your combination with an open crown and an open emotional center will likely make you very susceptible to what other people want. So let's say you go out in a group with people and you fancied Mexican food all day, but then you're in a group and you're like, oh my God, all of a sudden I fancy ice cream and I don't know why. Right? Okay. And then you go and have ice cream and you're like, oh, that was a bit naff. And you're like, why didn't I fancy ice cream? Why didn't I just go with Mexican food? It's probably because someone else wanted that.
Wow. I do say, I feel like sometimes I am a chameleon too, like just kind of going with the flow and not always am I going with the flow, but I can kind of pick up on, oh, that person's doing that. Okay, I'll do that too. Like, it makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because you're open emotionally. And basically what that means is your solar plexus is the right triangle next to that red square that you have.
Okay.
That is pointing inwards. That is your emotional solar plexus. And it's not so much that you're a chameleon, it's just that you're very empathetic, right? You pick up on other people's emotions. So again, in business, what this looks like a lot of the time, people with an open emotional solar plexus can feel very, very confused by their own emotions, because when you're by yourself, you're quite stable, right? You're just like, you're chill, you're good, everything's cool. But then as soon, like for instance, I have a defined emotional solar plexus. Depending on how I feel, you will pick that up and amplify it and pull it back. So if I feel excited, you will feel excited. And I don't know, have you ever walked into a room and you felt super chill and you felt good, and all of a sudden you might be like, oh my God, everything sucks.
Yeah, yes, totally. That's insane.
When
I think about that too, I very much feel like if I'm around a high energy person, I am like, boom, 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 we are high energy. And if it's low energy, I try to keep my energy up, but I will leave that feeling so drained. Like, oh my gosh, that was out of alignment for me. Like that really pulled me down. And even in crowds, I feel like that can happen too, like picking up on other people. So my friend, it's kind of hippie, but I'll like protect myself with light just to be able, because I feel like I am a little more susceptible to other people's energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like when you know that, for instance, right? So with clients, what I very often suggest is when they have an emotional open solar plexus, they go on client calls and they felt super, right? Amazing. Because I put a lot of value in self-embodiment work, because again, when we can embody that signature of ours as a type, right? And any of the other things that we want, it's going to be a lot easier to make the sale, because making the money isn't the problem. It's believing that you're worthy and that you can make the money. That's actually the issue, because we're not here to convince people to buy our shit, right? We're here to help them make a decision that is in their best interest. And so when we have people with an open emotional solar plexus, what can happen is they go on a sales call and they tank, and they're like, Adina, all of a sudden I just felt really nervous and I don't know why, and it sucks. And then I felt bulldozed, and then I didn't know what to say and I lost my words, right? And it's just like, well, imagine if you knew that based on your design, that those aren't your emotions, right? That you pick them up and amplified them from someone else. Well, what would that give you? What would that give you in negotiations? What would that give you as a mom? What would that give you as a friend? All of a sudden you can be like, actually, hold on a minute. I'm feeling very frustrated. Let me just get out of the room for a moment, see if this is still there when I leave this, when I leave this person. No, it's not. Okay, it's not mine. Then you can almost be like, okay, it's not my frustration. You can go above it, and then you can act differently.
Yeah. Which is amazing. And you kind of set yourself free. You go, and it goes back to what we were saying originally, which is living your authentic self, the permission to be you, because you know who you are, and you're able to ask those questions. Is this me? Is this not? Like, where is this coming from? Which I love. I just looked at the clock and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have been chatting for over an hour and it does not feel like it. I feel like we could talk forever about this. And so I so appreciate your time. I mean, I have learned so much in this hour. I know that there is so much more to learn. Will you tell people how to learn more with you?
Yes, no, thank you for the opportunity. And I agree. I didn't realize what the time was. I'm sorry. I do talk a lot.
No, I love it. Like, I'm just so caught up in it. Like, it's amazing. It's awesome.
So how you can learn more of it, if you feel called to do so, and if you feel called to do it on my platform, you can absolutely find me on Instagram. I hang out a lot there. I share a lot of stories, but also on my website. I do have a guide if you're in business and you want to use human design for business. I have a free PDF that you can download. You can find it on my website. You just sign up with your email, and then you can download that if that's what you would like to do.
Love it. Love it. That's the Sales by Design PDF. And we'll link to that too. Adina Kroll on Instagram. And any final thoughts, parting advice before we hang up today?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This was so fun, especially because I reached out to you and I'm like, I felt a little bit like, is this okay? Am I doing?
I loved it. I loved it. And like I said to Adina, she reached out. There's this cool platform that matches like podcasters with shows and guests and stuff. And it's called matchmaker.fm. And there was a message in there and she's like, you had me at wine, like would love. And there's so many people that are like auto responding on there, like pitching themselves. And yours was just so like human and wine and short. You weren't like this big pitch. And I was like, this is perfect. I totally want you on the show. And as I was looking at your Instagram, I'm like, she's going to be a great guest. I already feel like I want you to come back because I have more questions about human design. And I know you talk a lot about finances and women feeling more worthy and making more money. And that's just something I'm really passionate about too and such a believer in. So I feel like we might have to do a part 2 if you're up for it.
I love that, honestly.
Awesome.
So parting advice, just very quickly. I know that I didn't say it again. Thank you. But also if you take anything away from this, like anyone who's listening, just know that you're not broken. If there's something that you're feeling like you're not broken, it's probably part of your design. And I just want you to embrace that a little bit more. Even if you're not into human design and you're like, I don't give a crap about creating a chart. Don't. Just allow yourself to be you.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
If something is good for you, do it. You don't owe anyone permission or an obligation to explain yourself or what feels good to you. And that's like, I'm hoping that resonates.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You're not broken. And you're just you. You don't need the permission. I love it. And letting go of that. That's really freeing. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Great advice. Adina, thank you so much. One last time. Cheers. Thanks for being on the show.
I'm my second glass already.
We have a problem. Empty. Oh my God, I love it. Okay, well then it's time. It's time for more wine. I'm going to let you go do that. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And everybody, I will see you on the next See You. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. Are you on Instagram? I'd love to see pictures of you listening to the show, a screenshot of your favorite episode, and/or your favorite wines. Share them with me. Just follow and tag @Crystal Uncorked. I can't wait to see you there. All right, I'll see you on the next See You.